Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I'm Danny Prado, here as usual with Trevor and Noel, and today we have a special guest in, fresh off of a visit with Team Alpha Male, my dad, Dan Prado.
Wow, thank you for the nice introduction, son. You're doing a fantastic job. I think this is a great platform here to let people know about certain topics that intertwine both in their personal and professional lives. I think it's wonderful. So best wishes and continued success, but I'm excited about being here today. And after meeting on Friday with two highly competitive athletes, but really highly competitive people that are truly genuine. You know what they say in the business world or in the athletic world, that genuineness is the most unique key. People don't really care how much you know until they know how much you really care. And so after my visit with Team Alpha Male, it just reeked with true competition.
How does that work out when you get there? Do you just walk in and be like, hey, what's going on, guys? Or is it like, is there any formality to it? Or are you just like one of the other guys that just walks in the gym? It just blows my mind that you could just go in there and take pictures with them and end up on their Instagram. Like, it's crazy.
Well, it goes a little past history on that, Noel. Great question. I had a relationship with a young man named Tommy Sherkamp. And coached him at Escalon High School as a volunteer assistant wrestling coach. And Danny's known him for years. Actually, he'd come over to our house every now and then and work to earn some summer money. I'll fast forward. Tommy Sherkamp, highly competitive California State wrestler, two-time state medalist, went to school with Uriah Faber at UC Davis. So all this sort of just fell into place, you might think, but I think they had a little strategy behind it. But Uriah Faber will tell you that he got in on the beginning of something unique in the MMA world. And he was at the right place at the right time, but he also created his opportunities. And so he and Tommy formed this relationship, and I developed a friendship and got to know Uriah way back when, just on a hello, how you doing basis. Well, now I go in there just to see the competition, because there's something about when I get into a gymnasium or I get into the boxing ring and I can smell the sweat. You can feel I get goosebumps talking about it, because instantaneously I start thinking about the experiences I've had on the mat and in the ring. So I get to go there just as a fan, and I watch them. I just stand by the rail and I observe. I've never gone in there with the intention to get anything out of it other than view, watch, and share some experiences and some great tips that they can use so they can get better. That's pretty much the premises of it. So I go in just as a fan, as somebody that paid their ticket, you might say, paid to get into the movies. And then, wow, let me tell you something. When you get to watch them go at it at the high level of intensity that they do, with the extreme focus that they do it, I mean, these guys work like Swiss watches. They work perfectly all the time without fail. That is their goal. Now, we know it doesn't always end up that way, but their intention is amazing. So I'm honored to be here with Danny and Trevor and Noel and Jackie, and everybody can talk about competition, baby.
That brings us to it right there. That's what we're talking about today, competition, why it's important, and different things involving competition. And that was the easiest way to start that off that we've ever had in this podcast.
Yeah, we're going to have to step up our game for our introductions from now on, let me tell you that.
Well, probably good to share a little bit about how I got into boxing and
yeah, please do. I mean, your story is interesting, and I think everybody deserves to hear it. It's not something that's just, he's just a guy that goes around gym to gym and just starts shaking hands. I mean,
right, exactly.
There's background to it.
Something always starts somewhere, right? It's the origin. I always look at the origin of where somebody gets that first excitement and what they start to become passionate about. You know, when I was talking with Uriah Faber and Clay Guida, by the way, just a super nice guy, humble, comes from a big family, grew up in the Illinois area, and 3 miles from Wrigley Field. So we got to share a little bit of fun talking about those things. And we both laughed at the idea that when you grow up in a big family, the worst thing your mother could do is put a fruit basket on the table because it never lasts. We both chuckled about that. But I got to watch Clay and Uriah run the practice. And I'm telling you, I stood back and I watched how they went about instruction. Nothing is so awesome when you watch the very best in the world training these new up-and-coming fighters, and you watch how their attention to detail on the positioning of your head, your hands, the level changes that take place, all the intricacies of positioning, mat awareness, ring awareness. And I just am in awe when I watch them. I mean, I'm totally fixed on how they're instructing them. And that is so inspiring. So I always go to the origin. What makes somebody competitive? I don't think you can be competitive unless you have a true passion for what you're interested in. So if it's in a relationship or if it's in business, your business acumen rises, your athletic understanding rises, your competitive nature explodes, and we all have it in this room. You see, the art of competition really is this. We're really not competing with anyone. The biggest competition is always with yourself. If you can beat yourself, you can take on anything in life. But you have to understand that. And you have to understand why you're doing it. Go back to the Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs, it's the why. Simon Sinek talks about the why. It's more important because without why, you do not know and cannot know what your purpose is and what you're passionate about, right? Rudyard Kipling said it best. My 6 best friends that never let me down. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. So once we get that laid out, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So fantastic when you think about watching that on Friday and just getting, just listening to these guys instruct, but also on the side, Uriah is very kind with his time. Always gives me a tip or two. And then Clay and I just seem to kind of hit it off a little bit because we have similar personalities, very upbeat, very high energy.
Yeah, to say Clay Guida's a high energy guy is an understatement. You ever watch him bounce around in the ring? Yeah. That guy's round 5 of a fight and he's upside down, bouncing off the cage. I was just watching highlights with him and Benson Henderson, and yeah, he was doing somersaults in like the 4th round. I don't know.
He hasn't changed from the beginning of his career to the end of his career. He's the same guy from beginning to end. It's just the way he is. I think they're just cut from a different cloth. Him, guys like Uriah Faber, I mean, there's just something different about them that they just see it differently than most people. Yeah. I mean, you've spent time with them. I'm sure they carry themselves I'm sure they're humble people, but something mentality wise is just different when you have that different competitive mindset. And I agree. It has to be, right?
Noel, I agree. Noel, Trevor, Danny, I have to tell you, the greatest virtue that they have as far as what you hear and you can even see it, its interior, is their humility. And that has nothing to do with confidence. From the standpoint of making them look like they think they're weak, they're not confident. Actually, they're stronger because of it. They are willing to give credit where they need none for themselves. That's a great sign of confidence and growth. And there's 2 things that I always ask people when they get into anything in life. And I shared this with Team Alpha Male on the last 2 to 3 talks. And that is 2 things that make a huge difference. One is, what are you in it for? And 2, how do you want to be remembered? Now, I get goosebumps thinking about that. Even when I just stated it right there, I got goosebumps right now thinking about it, because when you think about what's important in life, okay, what are you in it for? And what kind of message you're going to leave? How are people going to remember what you did and said, right? So I think that's a powerful message, and that permeates out into everyday life. So good stuff.
So also, just to let everyone know, so my dad, he wrestled in high school, wrestled in college. I know he was starting to talk about that, and then the excitement of Alpha Male took over. Yeah, but so, Dad, so you were a high school wrestler. Go ahead, break it down. High school, college, and do the boxing thing.
I wrestled 3 years, My freshman year, I played basketball, believe it or not, and I was, the sixth or seventh guy. I started a couple games, and I came in as a substitute often enough to feel pretty competitive. And then it took a day at school one day when one of the guys said, "Hey, you couldn't beat me, Prado." And I said, "I think I could beat you." And so the next thing I know is the wrestling coach came up to me and said, "I heard you're on the basketball team, but I don't think you're good enough to be on my wrestling team." And I said, "I'm going out for your wrestling team." So that's all I needed to hear. So next thing I know, I went out for it. My first year, I got humbled. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I think failure is a good thing. Now, some people might think that's crazy. Darren Hardy, the former CEO of Success Magazine, said it best. You go out and fail, because not until you fail can you truly appreciate what victory is like. So junior year, I went from losing 22 matches my sophomore year to winning 29 matches my junior year, and then my senior year winning 37 matches and going to state. I was the second wrestler in the history of our high school to go to state. Now, there's a little message there. I set a goal to go to state, and I learned a lesson from that. If I had set the goal to be a state champion, I may have attained greater success. So there's a little lesson learned there. But yeah, I wrestled for the 3 years there. Went to junior college at Diablo Valley College in Pleasant Hill, and wrestled for one of the finest coaches, Bob Erickson, who was just a tremendous coach. He would get so much out of you. He would get your mind in the right place. We were also in great shape. So from then, I went on to Chico State University and wrestled 2 years for Armin Brett and the Chico State Wildcats. So in 1981, I qualified for the NCAA Division II National Championships along with 4 other fellow teammates. And then I boxed for the college. I went from wrestling to boxing. And that was such a great experience and the transition was not as tough as people think. Pretty natural transition because your body positioning is very similar. Your hand positioning is very similar. Your level changes, your movements. So yeah, I went on to do that, and then I boxed gold. I won a National Collegiate Club college championship. So it wasn't NCAA, but schools at the club level were, Lock Haven State, Penn State, Virginia Military Institute, Reno, Cal Berkeley, Chico State, and quite a few Air Force and Army and all those teams. And was a great venue. HBO did it. I got to meet Larry Holmes, the heavyweight champion of the world. He was kind enough to talk with me for about 30 seconds, signed my gloves, and that was a great moment. And then got to meet Larry Merchant, was interviewed by Larry Merchant from HBO, and Barry Tompkins, who was a former sportscaster here in the Bay Area, KPIX News. Barry Tompkins is one of the finest I've ever seen in the business, so I'd sure like to see him again. Actually, 10 seconds before my championship fight against Bobby Navarro, who was a terrific competitor, I looked at Barry Tompkins 10 seconds before the bell rang, and I said, "Hey, Barry, we miss you in the Bay Area, baby." And he just smiled. So I was able to relieve a little tension that way and then get into the mix. So that's what I've done. Then I came back to Concord and fought for the Little C Athletic Club and won a Northern California Golden Glove Championship at the Concord Pavilion, which is now the Sleep Train, I believe.
Yeah, Sleep Train now.
Great venue. All my friends, I can just see them all there high-fiving me as I'm coming out for my fight, and a lot of hype in that. There was a lot of hype in that fight, especially locally, because a lot of my friends that always wanted to see me fight and do it locally, it turned out great. I remember earlier in the day going to weigh-ins. And that's a unique situation when you go weigh in. Now, I had a little bit of familiarization with it because as a wrestler, there's a lot of psyching out going on when you weigh in. The looks that you give people, the way you get off the scale and you look at them. You see it happening right now in the UFC, right? You see it at some of those weigh-in when they're televised.
A guy can get beat before it even starts.
Yeah. A gentleman named Adam Markalatis, who was my opponent from the San Francisco M&M Boxing Club. He had announced 2 weeks before our fight that he was going to turn professional. So there was a little message there I think he was trying to send me that, you should be intimidated, Danny Prado, because I'm turning professional. And it came out in all the papers. And so earlier in that day, we went to weigh in, and there were all the championship jackets that had the USA boxing glove decal right on the front. On the back, gold lettering, glittering off this royal blue. And it said, 1983 Northern California Golden Glove Boxing Champion. And when I saw that, let me tell you, aesthetics means everything sometimes. I saw that coat and I fell in love with it. And before I could say anything, Adam Markelatis looked at me when he got off the scale. He says, that's going to be my coat. That's going to be my coat. And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, I respect you for that, Adam. And he smiled and I said, but I think it's going to fit me a lot better. And he didn't say much, but I put a smile. I always like to have a little fun with the competition because I think it kind of calms my nerves a little bit. But I end up winning that, and I have the jacket. I can't fit into it anymore, but I have the jacket in my closet. And every once in a while, when I need a little lift, I just look at that and say, "Look what you did then. You can do it again." Right? So I think, you just go to reinvent yourself every day. It's one of the things that Uriah Faber and I talked about, not this last trip, but the trip before, was Howard Schultz, CEO, founder or CEO of Starbucks, said it best. I don't care how many home runs you're hitting, reinvent yourself every day. And that's what I love about competition, because every day you get up, you're reinventing yourself, whether you realize it or not. And if you don't, complacency sets in. And you're going to get beat. Now, we all go through some tough times, and you have to find a way to scrap and get out of it. And I think that's what's beautiful about competitors, is we never give up. Even when things are tough, you got to find a way to keep your head up. That's a little bit of the background.
So you see why every single one of my siblings and myself are so competitive.
Yeah, it's starting to all come full circle. Yeah, it totally makes sense now.
Yeah.
You brought up an interesting thing about earlier. You were talking about how you need to fail to kind of move forward and stuff like that. And then Trevor in a previous podcast brought up how everybody gets these participation trophies now, and how do you feel about that? What's your view on participation trophies and whatnot? Trevor, if you want to go in depth with the question, kind of talk about it a little bit.
Well, just, as a kid growing up, I played a lot of team sports. I wasn't really involved in the boxing or wrestling world, so I bring a different mindset, I think,
right,
compared to Dan over here. So growing up, I think it was up until I was 9 years old at Bel Passe Baseball here in Modesto, California, that they gave you trophies no matter what place you got in. And then after that, they started doing first and second place, and that was it. And I think at 10 years old, you kind of understand that you have to earn it. But I think nowadays they're starting to even give out those trophies for, 8th place, 9th place, which, it's a small trophy, but it's still a reward for your season. And if you're a quote unquote loser for that season, doesn't it kind of ruin competition in a sense?
Oh, Trevor, I'm total agreement with you. I'm glad that you brought that topic up, because here's the sad part, not only in society today, but in athletics. We are rewarding mediocrity. And when you reward mediocrity, you get always, at best, Trevor, mediocrity. That's it. You get mediocre. No athlete or no business person or no family member wants to be mediocre. I would rather fail at going after something great than be so successful at something mediocre. When you go into Team Alpha Male on the board, it's the greatest brand I've ever seen. And here's why people want to copy them. On the board, it says, dream big, stay positive, work hard, and enjoy the journey. If you do those things, you don't get mediocrity. You get high levels of achievement. You see, in order to achieve things you've never achieved before, you got to become someone you've never been before. Now, that's personal development, right? If you want to have more in your life, you got to become more as a person. So that's what I like about reaching a little bit further. One of the greatest books I've ever read, and I love sharing it with people. Lance Palmer actually has a copy of that. Daniel bought me the book, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. The Little Book of Talent. The Little Book of Talent by Daniel Coyle. And he talks about reaching a little bit further. Albert Einstein said, if you exhausted yourself and expanded your mind to where you're in total exhaustion, mark that spot and then reach a little bit further, and that's your sweet spot. That's your sweet spot.
And that, in essence, is in any kind of competition. That's what you're trying to do. Whether it's competition against yourself or competition against other people, you're always pushing past that point. You could go for a run around the block right now, and 3/4 of the way around, you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna walk the rest of the way because I'm hurting. But you have to force yourself. You have to go past that where you were exhausted before, and that's something that's just been a part of who we are as human beings for thousands and thousands of years. It's like the dominance hierarchy. It's that feeling of the hero is always the guy who's the most competitive, the strongest. He's the one who goes out and slays the dragon outside of the town, and rescues the kids that were being eaten, or the mayor's daughter who was kidnapped by the dragon. Then he ends up marrying her, and then brings her back, and then they have kids, and then his kids are the biggest and strongest in the village, and everyone tries to measure up to that. So in essence, and then the women, they always choose the guy who's the star quarterback. So the cheerleader's always dating the star quarterback. So in essence, it's bred into our DNA. We select that. So we have competition in our DNA. And like you were saying, Trevor, how they're trying to do away with competition and making everyone equal when it comes to trophies and things like that. It's kind of sinister because in essence, they're trying to take away something that's a part of our human experience.
Oh, that's one of the greatest robberies right now going on. That's a great point, Danny. And Trevor, I'm glad you brought that topic up, because how do you get to the top of anything in life if you're not willing to put everything in your heart and soul into it? Now, there's a lot of strategic planning that goes on, tactical planning, and so on, right? I think success in anything we do in life, if you want to be really, really good at it, it's not an accident. It's not something you just say, hey, I'm hoping and waiting and I'm wishing. You see, one of my, since passed away, but Jim Rohn said it best. He says, success is not for the ones that just wish and hope. It's for the searchers that search out ways to be better, right? To get better at what we do. And mediocrity is suffocating people every day. And we all fall into that. We all fall into it. And the key is how fast you can catch yourself and turn it. And one of the things I talked about with Team Alpha Male was the mind shift. So avoid mediocrity. It's usually because people don't know what their purpose is. This is why you get mediocrity. I want to hit on something that's very, very crucial, is that you have to have a personal philosophy. Everyone should have a personal philosophy. You should write it down, because what your personal philosophy really is your purpose. That's what drives your passions, right? So that drives your attitude. And then if you have an awesome attitude, you're going to start doing the action-oriented things to get you the results that you want to have in your life, right? And then that usually leads to the lifestyle that you choose. So that's a big area. If people if they're not growing themselves, if they're not reaching for the stars, it's almost impossible. I mean, you've got to fail, though. You've got to fail to really appreciate it. I mean, Edison said it best, he says, I failed my way to success.
Feel to think that that's the most important thing is, okay, everybody says, oh, you need to fail to get there. Like when you're talking about a journey, you're saying, oh, that journey is going to be long and you're going to have those road bumps and it's not going to be easy. But then the flip side is that you have groups that are giving out participation trophies and stuff like that and saying, oh, no, it's okay if you fail. Don't worry about it. It'll get better. But unless you feel that struggle of the failure, you're never going to know that feeling of, okay, I need to get better, because you're not noticing it be failure if you just get rewarded for it. It doesn't make any sense. So I don't understand how you could be hypocritical like that and say, oh, you need to fail. But on the flip side, it's okay to fail. Don't worry about it. You have to have that drive.
Well, just thinking of failure, I mean, the greatest basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, didn't make his high school basketball team. What happened after that? He strived to get better. Because of that failure, he pushed himself and became a brand in himself. A billionaire.
Absolutely.
The greatest basketball player of all time. because of failure, he grew from that.
Yeah, there's examples everywhere of not even just athletes, but like Dad was kind of segueing into bringing it into your life and having like a personal philosophy. There's examples all through the business world, all through the creative arts, all the way through to like we're talking about sports. There's examples everywhere of people who have hit that roadblock, and the truly great ones go past it because they have this competitive drive with themselves, not just with everyone else, but with themselves. And I think that's what separates greats like Kobe, your favorite basketball player. And it separates those people from just, the sixth man on the bench who's just happy to cash that check and make his millions.
I'd love to know how to get to that mind switch, like you were saying, or the mind shift. I'm sorry.
Right.
The mind shift of, so you recognize it, you realize, okay, I'm being mediocre. I'm stuck in that lull. How do you get that mind shift of, okay, I'm going to set that mental philosophy and kind of push myself forward? I mean, because it's not easy. I mean, you've been conditioned so long in your life to where you at now. How hard is it to make that mind shift? And is it only certain people that can do it, like people like Uriah that are just cut from a different cloth? Or is it something that everyone can do?
I believe it's something everyone can do, but I'm not sure everyone wants to make the effort and work hard to do it. It is extremely grueling emotionally. The time that you have to put in, you see, most people that are getting better all the time every day are learning that they have to learn how to delay instant gratification. We all want to win fast. That's fine if you want to win fast. Some people hit the lotto. They do. And that's wonderful. But how many actually win the lotto, right? So everybody should start fresh. And you have to become a student. You have to become a student. I mean, Sandra Bullock won an Academy Award, and she said, always be the student. She's correct. Always be the student. The way that you raise your game is that you commit to reading, listening to audiobooks, networking with people, studying your industry, committing to getting better on a daily basis. You see, everybody thinks this instant success is okay. Instant coffee never tastes like really good coffee, right? So on the subject, Trevor, it was great that he brought that up, the failing aspect. We're talking about that. The reason Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or any of you or any of us all sitting in here is we look at failure not as a defining moment in our life, that I'm no good. I'm just bad. Why am I so bad? We look at failing as the casted stepping stones to future success. We use it as a tool, a learning experience. One of the greatest books I've ever read is The Greatest Salesman in the World by the late Og Mandino. And he has a vow of success. And the first vow of success says, I was born to succeed, not to fail. I was born to triumph, not to bow my head in defeat. I was born to toast victories, not to whimper and whine. Does that statement, that vow of success, reek at all of mediocrity? Does it reek at all of, here's your trophy, here's your ribbon? Matter of fact, if Og Mandino today ever saw a coach hand out a participatory ribbon, he would probably get it and tear it up or cut it, because he'd say, you're doing that kid an injustice. What's going to allow us to be really good is understanding what our strengths are and the weaknesses that we got to work on, working more on your strengths. I'm a firm believer of that. And disciplining yourself enough on a daily basis so you can perform ordinary things extraordinarily well. It's all tied into the disciplines, right? Ron Serino said, when freely chosen, discipline is absolute freedom. And so we talk about those who are drivers. I have Michael Jordan. I love him. Michael Jordan's awesome. He said, every time you miss a workout, every time you sleep in, every time you miss your lifting or running, you make it that much easier for me to beat you. And I think what I'm impressed with today is I'm sitting around 4 people in this room alongside with me that are very competitive. And I can tell just from the discussions and also the topic. Sharpen the saw, which is the 7th habit from Stephen Covey's book, Highly Effective People, The Habits of Highly Effective People. First one is proactive. It's funny how that works, right? Proactive people are always busy preparing. Reactive people are always busy repairing.
It's very true.
So if you want to be good at something, just keep working at it. You're going to have naysayers. You're going to have people saying, I don't believe in you. I don't think you can do it. Sugar Ray Robinson said, in order to be a champion, you got to believe in yourself even when other people don't. So make sure you surround yourself with a great support team.
And one thing too, I think one of the craziest things too, and bouncing off of what Dad said about having that mindset of that Michael Jordan had of, oh, if I miss a workout, this other person is improving. With competition, especially if you're really big into competition with yourself, the hardest thing sometimes to do is to take a step back and rest. Take a step back and recover your mind. It's good to have a little R&R sometimes. You see a lot of these athletes burn themselves out, or you see a lot of people at work burn themselves out with their careers and don't spend enough time with their family, don't spend enough time, recovering their body if they're an athlete. And that's a very important part of competition that kind of gets overlooked a little bit. And I don't like that because I have that. I love the nutrition side of things. So you have to learn to repair yourself mentally and physically.
What you bring up there is just this last year with the Golden State Warriors striving to break the Bulls record, pushing themselves to achieving it and breaking it for the regular season. And it was kind of washed away because they didn't win the championship. And the reason I think why they didn't is because they were so worn out from striving to achieve that goal of breaking the regular season record. They didn't have enough R&R, like you said, to push it in the finals against the Cavs. Once the Cavs gained momentum, the Warriors were done. And this year...
Well, that was the big debate, right? Was do they go for it? Do they not? Do you rest? Do you play? I mean, and I think it's a mental thing too. It goes for everybody. The mental part of the game is you're sitting there struggling is, all right, what should I do? What's the right move going forward? And the mental part of the competition is just as hard on you as the physical part of it. I mean, you said you got to rest your mind, you got to rest your body, and you can't do one without the other. You got to do both.
I think with the Warriors too, I think that, you mentally check out when you get to a goal. You see this all the time with athletes. If you told an athlete that they were going to run 13 miles and they pushed all out to 13 miles, and then you told them, oh, you know what? This race was actually 15. You got to run 2 more miles. They're all going to fail because mentally they get to that point of, oh, that's the finish line. I'm done. So I think with the Warriors, because we're both Warriors fans here and Dad is too. So we're Warriors fans. I think what happened is their mental check was, we're going to get to the end of the season. We're going to get 73 wins. And then their brain told them, we did it. But yet they still had to play 16. We had to get, how many more wins or whatever it was they needed.
Mr. Prado, did you ever have anything like that? I mean, with your competition, like whether it was the boxing or I think you were talking about when you're wrestling and stuff, you set yourself a goal. But did you ever hit that goal and then feel kind of just at a loss for what you were supposed to do after that point? Or were you just always like, all right, after that goal, I already have a goal set for the next one? Like where was your mindset?
Oh, great question. That is, that happens to a lot of people that get to higher levels of success in sports or business. You put so much time and effort and planning and you get there and you reach it. And what we forget to do, especially when you're younger, I didn't know much about personal development like I do now. I absolutely love it. It's a passion of mine. But back then, I didn't know how to reinvent myself. So it would take me a little while, and then I'd get back to it and hit the goal. But it didn't have to take that long. So I think, that's kind of a human nature flaw that we have. So if you don't have, I think Brian Tracy said it best, if you're not willing to write down your goals, it's a mere fantasy and a dream. Think about that for a second, right? Something to think about. And that goes right back to what Trevor brought up and Daniel and I've been talking about here with this mediocrity. What happens is if you set big goals and you hit them, all of a sudden you come down off of it. It's like the comedian that makes people laugh all the time. And when they step off the stage, they're like, what else is there? And so sometimes you'll find a lot of good comedians that find themselves very depressed. They don't know how to balance that out. Darren Hardy says you really never get balance because you're even giving your time and efforts to a lot of certain areas and others suffer, right? You just got to learn which ones you want to give the attention to, right? So the law of efficiency is you never have enough time to do everything in a day, but you always have enough time to do the most important things for you. But on that subject, though, I want to hit on a good thing, and Daniel brought it up too, is going back to the participation awards. I'll never forget when Daniel and Robert were playing baseball.
Robert's my brother. Yeah, Robert's my brother, by the way.
My other side. So, for the audience, Robert is his brother. So, both really terrific ball players, very competitive, getting after it, good infielders, solid hitters, just good all around, understood the game. So, especially at the early ages, you get a lot of that. It's okay, Billy. It's all right. It's okay. You struck out. And when we'd be in the stands, my wife, Marion, she's an amazing lady. She gets it. She says, that's wrong. It's not good to strike out.
You lose when you strike out, for crying out loud.
She and then she loves to get their energy going, and she's very fired up with enthusiasm when it comes to being a fan, and she wants the kids to get better, right? And the only way you get better is you learn from the mistakes and you start succeeding too, right? You start succeeding, and I don't want a pat on the back if you're okay as an athlete. I don't want a pat on the back from a coach that says, it's okay that you struck out. Coach, it's not okay that I struck out, but thank you for being here with me. Can you help me now avoid this in the future with maybe a tip or two? It means you want to learn, right? But it's one of the things I always enjoy about, and I respect my wife so much for that, because she's highly competitive, and she's not gonna sit there and watch that. It probably turns her stomach. I know it does. It turns mine. And I think that's why you'll see with the boys, and even my daughter, Alice, are highly competitive, and they're drivers, and they're motivated, and you make your own motivation, right? So I'm glad you brought up that subject, because that's actually a suffocator of what's going on right now in the world.
So quick question now. In today's day and age, since just for people, or this, older times mindset of being able to, to express competitive values, now you have rules at sporting events where parents can't cheer and poke fun at the other team, and because everyone's got to be nice to everyone. Back in the old days, if someone threw a ball in the dirt, you could yell, "Dirty ball, you suck," all that kind of stuff. But now you can't do that kind of stuff. So Trevor, you had mentioned that you were helping coach your son's basketball team. So how does that work now when you're coaching and you have to kind of still fulfill the public part of like, oh yeah, everyone's doing a good job, all right guys, but still be like, hey, listen guys, we really need to pick it up because we're losing. How does that fit in? Because I haven't coached, and I don't think Noel's coached, but you two have.
It's pretty difficult, especially with today's day and age of the cookie cutter mentality of everybody is a winner, which is false. But I get the mindset of everybody's a winner because you want them to strive to be a winner. But it's just not the case all the time. And it's hard to, if we're down by 10 points, it's hard to get people motivated and keep going. But you have to be so soft and sincere with them, because they
BPC.
They're young minds. They were 8, 9-year-olds that I'm coaching right now. So it's hard because they're not as physically there yet in basketball. So the expectation of what they're capable of to what I'm expecting of them to what they can put out there it's difficult to mesh those two things.
Is it a 10-foot hoop?
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah. See, 10 points is like 40.
Do you see a difference in some of the kids? Like, I mean, it's a whole team. So do you see like you can coach one player a certain way, but you have to coach another player a certain way also? Because you like mentally or conditionally, they're just different. So like one might take a pat on the back differently than someone saying, hey, step it up, you're screwing it up. Like, can you see that in your kids? And do you kind of like try to treat them differently that way? Or do you have to do like, it's black and white, I got to treat them all the exact same?
That's the thing with coaching. You have to understand your players. Certain people react to positive and negative reinforcement differently. Some kids will strive if I'm on them. They'll be like, I can do better. I can live up to coach's expectations of winning this game. Or some kids have to, sugarcoat everything, be like, hey, just gotta keep pushing. Never mind that. Gotta strive forward. And it's just the way it is nowadays.
The psychology of coaching, boy, you hit it. You do have to, I believe, treat them all differently. If you're going to get the most out of an athlete or an employee, you have to first and foremost understand, right, what their personality trait is. And that goes back to the psychology of the mind, right? So that is this person upbeat and enthusiastic and takes to that pat on the back? Or if you discipline that person, they step back and they, oh no, I can't perform now. So it's a real fragile athletes and people and companies. And I'm one of them. I know where my fragile side is, and you just gotta toughen up and man up to admitting that's where your weakness is, and be able to take that. And I'm sure you guys all see it in your business, what you're doing now and with your families. But coaching, psychology, the psychology of the mind. I'm reading a great book right now called Empires of the Mind by Dr. Dennis Waitley. He's a psychologist, sports psychologist for the Olympic teams in the 80s and the 90s. And he said the one thing that they did very well was they would always visualize the gold medal going around their neck. And I just shared this the other day with Team Alpha Male. And I said, Dr. Dennis Waitley put it best. Who you see is who you'll be. Now marinate on that for a little bit, right? Who you see is who you'll be. The best coaches, the best leaders, and what I enjoy when I'm around my boys talking about this stuff, Daniel and Robert and Vincent and Joseph, we're all involved with it, is that, the best way to predict your future is to create your future. Map it out, plan it out, start working at it. Joseph and I, when I'm driving him to school, he's reading my book from John Maxwell to me. He's reading. He's sharing little tidbits here and there. But the psychology of the mind, right, is if you're in a knowledge-based world, I call it the triangle of success. At the very bottom is knowledge, right? Facts, figures, theories, knowledge. On the left side are skills, and on the right side is attitude. There are so many athletes that we as coaches, we have an obligation and responsibility to share that with them and get to know them and let them know that they fall into these categories. And if they were to just add this one, just think how good you could be, right? So that's our job, is to elevate their game. And this is how we do it. We empower them to see themselves better than they are.
Yeah, and I think going off of what you said too earlier was the psychology of things. You guys were both mentioning that. You're seeing a huge increase as we're becoming more aware of how important the mind is just in our everyday life. We're starting to unlock a lot of things with our brains that weren't possible 10, 15, 20, even 30 years ago. And you're seeing a lot more with this understanding of the science of the mind. You're seeing a lot more sports psychology. You're seeing a lot more of these high-profile athletes going to sports psychologists. Donald Cerrone was talking about that on a podcast I listened to the other day. And he was talking about how he had that issue where he would go into the big title fights. And we all know that Cerrone had issues in big title fights where he'd get just bombed early and be done. And we know how good he is in the non-title fights. He'll kick anybody's ass in the non-title fights. But he had to cross that bridge, and he realized, I've got a deficiency here, which is something big for a guy like Cerrone because he's the party guy. He's enjoying his life and on his ranch, he's water skiing and brings his RV to the fights and stuff. He's not your prototypical zeroed in competitor, but yet he finds the same amount of success as a lot of these zeroed in guys. And it's because he mixes the R&R and combines it with what he sees as a deficiency. He needs that sports psychology.
Right. And like your dad said, Mr. Prado, you said that you got to be able to see your flaw, know what it is, and strive to fix it. You can't. Right. It all has to mesh together. You can't go without it.
Yeah, you see a ton of that in jiu-jitsu. I was just going to say, you see a ton of that. You see guys who are scared to roll. You'll see guys who are scared to spar, and they'll be the higher belt guys because they're scared to tap. Now, the whole thing with jiu-jitsu or a lot of martial arts like that is there isn't room for a lot of douchebags in jiu-jitsu because you can't be the guy who's going to get, have that ego. You lose your ego because you're going to lose every time. It doesn't matter if you're a black belt. You could get caught by a white belt if you do the wrong thing, and you're going to get choked out. And you've got to have that. It's a sense of pride to not have pride. You have to have that ability to go, okay, I got caught. Now I need to learn how to do this. But you'll see guys do this. You'll see guys go, oh, like you're just about to catch this. Like I see you get a purple belt or a guy that's more advanced. You get him in a move and you're about to choke him out. And he goes, oh, hold on. You could have got me this way if you had done this. And he stops you from getting him, and you never get to choke him out because he's so insecure about getting tapped out.
And then I know you said it's in jiu-jitsu, but could it, that seems like it'd be something in everything. Like you were saying how with your IFA and everything, the way he was teaching everything, being in certain positions. And then, so yeah, that goes into the jiu-jitsu, but, you said also being a student. So with every sport that you're in, being a student and kind of humbling yourself, I'm constantly learning, never being on top because you always want to try to go further than being on top. So you're always learning something new. So humbling yourself to knowing that you're not perfect. You're going to be learning as you go the whole way through. That might be the sign for success, like you said, always try to be the student. I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
which actress was it that said
No,
that?
very accurate. You know, and I love what you said, the word success. I mean, that's a topic in itself. I mean, what is success? For some people, they think it's just having a lot of money, having a lot of accolades, having a lot of medals, being the most popular person, right? They're more caught up in being looking at it so differently. But I've come to, over the years, and I'm still learning this. I'm still a student. I don't know everything, and I know I'll never know anything. But one thing I do know, no matter how old I get, as the days go by, it's going to pass by anyway. It's going to pass by. Time's going to pass by. So you might as well pass it by learning and growing and developing and experiencing, right? So you hit on something, success, and I think that's a word that's very misunderstood today. Instant success, right? They want it fast. And here's 3 good definitions of what success is. Success is doing what you have to do when you have to do it, even if you don't feel like it. Performing the daily disciplines so you can do the ordinary things consistently very well. Day in and day out. It's like the jab. The jab, the jab, the jab, the jab, the jab, the jab, sets it up, bam, right? And then last but not least, success is really what you attract by the person you become. So if you elevate your game, you raise your level, your knowledge, your skills, your competency, your confidence, your ability to overcome failure and not see failure as a defining moment. You see it as just a stepping stone to the eventual successes. The ability to delay instant gratification will allow an athlete to, I believe, raise their competitive spirit and get better and better and better all the time. And I shared with Team Alpha Male the first time I talked with them was, you come into the world learning, earning, and returning. So the learning part, we all, at what I call a very basic philosophy. And then we get in the midlife and we've got expanded philosophy. And as time goes on, you gain so much knowledge in all these areas like all of you are doing in here. And what we're talking about, you start getting into refined philosophy. You start cleaning up your game and you start returning this stuff. Like Trevor was talking about being a coach and being able to help your guys get better, but you got to understand their characters, right? He's now giving back and returning. I get to share this with young fighters and wrestlers and my own children. We get to talk about it. And you start talking about, hey, you start refining that. You get to give back. You get to share it now. That's the most fun. Now, I'm having the most fun in my life right now, being able to kind of just share that. So that word success, it's a funny word. It's not inexpensive. And it also has a shelf life. It's like food. It's an expiration date on it, right? And I think the very best way to get to the top shelf of your profession, which I'm still trying to get there, and I'm going to get there. There's no doubt I'm going to get there, but it will continue. When I get there, I'm going to stop and realize I can still get a little bit higher. So the best way to really get to the top shelf in life is to stand on every book you read.
It's true. The more knowledge you gain,
That's right.
I think that's the biggest block to people that are trying to be competitive or people that are trying to be competitive just with themselves. The biggest block is you're scared of not knowing something. And that we were talking about that a couple of times. I know off air, we were talking about people being scared of not knowing things and letting it be a hindrance to their growth. Because if you're not outside your comfort zone, you're not growing. And a lot of people like to stay inside that little box. Yeah. There's a theoretical physicist. I will say this. I do this once a podcast and I always mess up one word. theoretical physicist.
I've gotten good at editing. I can fix that.
Good. Lawrence Krauss. And he was talking about that. He said, people have such a fear of not knowing. I listened to it on the JRE and he said, you have to learn to be comfortable with not knowing. And Joe Rogan also says that too. He says, you have to be able to admit that you're wrong and not stand behind it. There are so many people in the world that are just like, and it holds you back in competition. You go, oh no, I know how to do this. I know how to choke that guy out. Don't worry about it. I don't need to learn because you're scared it's going to show a weakness in yourself. You actually get stronger by becoming more open, by becoming like opening this little void within yourself to allow other people's knowledge in. when you make a soup, you don't use one ingredient, right? I mean, you're going to use a bunch of ingredients from a bunch of different sources. You're going to use olives from Italy, and you're going to use, if you're making a sandwich, you're going to use tomatoes from, South America. You're going to use a whole bunch of different places and a whole bunch of different ingredients that are all going to be different, and they're going to come together to create this masterpiece. And that's the essence of knowledge in competition. It helps you. It's the spice.
Danny, that's a great point. It really is, because what you're really saying with all that is you have to learn to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. That's how you're growing. That was a great point. That is how you grow. You put yourself in a position where you're vulnerable. Vulnerability is one of the greatest abilities of all. Of course, adaptability, you have to be there too, because there's environment, things are changing all the time. But that's a great point. You cannot grow. If it's not challenging you, you're not growing. You're going to get what Trevor talked about and what you brought up with your good questioning today, by the way. And you get mediocrity. You see, mediocrity usually comes from a lack of high confidence and self-belief than it does from a lack of skill. We can learn some skills, but you got to believe in it. You got to believe in it. You got to have an inner burning desire and a passion to get really good at something. And the only way you do that is what Daniel just said. Learn to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. That's how you grow. That's how you stretch yourself. You got to stretch yourself, right? And that's the beauty of competition. When you watch some of these fighters, they want to fight the best in the world. I mean, watching these guys practice, the best in the world, the Cody Garbrandts, the TJ Dillashaws, the Chad Mendes, the Joseph Benavidez. You're looking at the up-and-coming fighters. You got guys like Lance Palmer. By the way, Lance Palmer is a class individual. Humble, modest, loves to share the I guess you say the rewards with other people, right? He's willing to give credit to others where he need none for himself. He does a great job of it. That whole team, alpha male, is kind of like that. But getting back to stretching yourself, watch those guys work out. Watch their mindset. They have the finest recipe in the business today. And Daniel talked about adding the olives from Italy, right? They're adding little tiny bits of different ingredients so that they can get the very best and have the best team. Right.
Yeah, and you can see that they have a stable of people that come through there. They always have prospects. It never stops. Team Alpha Male, it's that recipe. They nonstop. Like right now, you got Cynthia Calvillo coming up. She's going to be fighting Joanne Calderwood coming up here in the UFC. And she just came out of nowhere and she just blitzed through 2 fights. And then you look at the rest of the guys. They
Alex Sandoval, right?
Yes.
You see what he did lately in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
He went there and put a little, what we call, I guess, no pun intended, country whooping on somebody there, right? So he brought some action to Nashville.
Yeah, it's the mindset. And the one thing you really notice with a lot of the guys from that gym and the women as well is there's not a lot of me. As Jackie's dad always says, he can't stand Ronaldo from Madrid because he's like, oh, it's always me. You can't have that. You got to have something for the team. And that's why that team is always so successful. That's why the belts are coming now. Faber laid the foundation and all the rest of the guys are reaping the rewards. And you saw that when Garbrandt won the title against Dominic Cruz, you saw that in the hallway after. If you watch the UFC puts out that little thing called the agony and the victory, I think it's called. It's a little 5 or 6 minute video at the end of every UFC. And you see all the guys from Alpha Male crying in the back and they're talking and they're all tearing up. And it's just like, you can see that brotherhood. So when in competition, we've all been on that one magical team, that team that you can point back and go, I remember those guys because there was that one time in the bottom of the 6th inning or that one time, 3 minutes left in the 4th quarter. We just gelled. We just got together and we just said, we're going to do this. And you have this bond when it comes. And that's why things like the military are so strong. This bond that people have with each other in competition, because isn't the military and war the ultimate competition? I mean, that is life or death competition. So you have that brotherhood that forms to a lesser extent in sports. And when you find the right people to have that with, it brings your competition to a whole nother level.
Yeah, no, it brings up a great point because it's funny how we keep coming back around to Team Alpha Male, not just because of my visits. And I'm glad you asked me about that. And I think it's wonderful. But going back to what I talked about earlier, success is what you attract by the person you become. Why are we talking about them so much? Because they're attractive. Why are people joining their company? Because they're attractive.
It's the abs.
They're attracting They're attracting, they're attracting people because there's a recipe there, and they're going, these guys are studs. This is a championship team. I want to be a part of it, right? You're attracting future winners. And I like the point that was made. The point really is, think like a CEO. John Maxwell talks about this in his books. Think like a CEO, but you're a team member. So you've got individuals going about their business like they own it, because they do, because we're all CEOs of our lives. And they're just happen to be able to share it with others. And it's a lot more fun that way. If I had to do a talk by myself, which people do webinars now, right? And one of the toughest things for people to do in webinars is they're just looking at nothing. And they're giving an instructive webinar on how to use software or whatever it may be. But we're here, we have camaraderie. And I can feed off of Trevor. I can feed off Danny and you, Noel, right? And the input of anybody else that pops in and talks about something. And you get an idea. And then you segue into something else. But isn't that kind of ironic how we come full circle? We always keep talking a little bit about a winning formula, a recipe. And that's what you're creating here, by the way. I want to tell you, congratulations. You guys are creating a little something special here. I think on and on, you're gonna find a lot of followers. And thanks for letting me be a part of it today, for having a little fun with it.
Yeah, it's a nice little competition of ideas here. A little mini competition of ideas going around the table and passing knowledge back and forth.
I had to learn the hard way to deal with Daniel on competition, because the first time I was playing Daniel in basketball, he beat me. And it was tough for me to deal with because, as a dad, you kind of want to always have the upper hand, like, I can beat you. And we're out playing in hot summer day, and I kept denying that he made that 3-pointer.
Steph Curry would have been proud. It was a sky hook, deep 28-foot three from the top of the key.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even look. I knew it was the only way because Dad was pressing hard. He's like, it's getting close. This is going to be the moment when my son beats me. I'm not going to let it happen. I want another year or two.
It's true, Trevor. It was happening.
I threw this Kareem Abdul-Jabbar sky hook, and it went in. And Dad, I didn't see it.
Exactly.
I didn't see it.
And I kept denying it. And my wife, Mary, was watching from the kitchen window, and she goes, "You got to admit it. He beat you." And she was right. He beat me. But I had to kind of make him work for that good feeling of getting that victory.
I just think it's awesome that we even got you here, sitting in this chair, having this conversation with us. When we first started this podcast, I mean, Danny and I were talking about what topics we might do, and with this competition one came up, and I was just like, we got to have your dad on this podcast. I mean, there's no other person that would be able to have this in depth and this kind of just conversation about the topic like you would. I mean, it's all here in this past 45 minutes or so.
Awesome.
You have the footprints and the handprints and the stories to back everything up. So I'm just glad we got to have you here. I mean, it's a huge honor, and I appreciate you even taking the time to sit down with us.
Noel, I want to thank all of you too. I feel I'm very appreciative of having the opportunity to share some of those stories. Kind of fun to recollect some of that. I do want to say that you guys got a good team here. Keep up the good work, and thank you for letting me be a guest today.
That's all for today's episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or iTunes to get all updates on future content. And just remember, it's not important who's right or wrong, but it's always important to ask why.